Hello everyone, it's Lindsay and I'm back today with a Sonshine Stamp Co video. I'll be using these two sets. I'll have them linked down below. Be sure to go check out the blog post over on Sonshine Stamp Co for more details on today's project and their shop to pick up these stamps. So I'm going to be creating a card. I'm starting out with a piece of Tim Holtz watercolor paper and I'm working on the smoother side of that. And I've gone ahead and picked out some stamps from the floral set that I'm going to use to create a patterned background. So I'm creating this card for the encouragement dare. That's something that's going on with Dayspring. Be sure to go check out my blog post from a couple days ago that talks a little bit more about what that is. But I thought it'd be fun to do a handmade card today. And so I will be creating a pattern paper. I'm stamping the largest image using some Versamark ink. This is a clear sticky ink because I'm going to be doing some heat embossing. You might be able to see my stamping, and that's only because my stamp is dirty. This ink is actually clear, and so I'm just kind of equally spacing out this larger leaf and rotating it, turning it to give some variety to this pattern. Now I'm going to go ahead and cover this with some Zing embossing powder. This is the copper metallic finish, and this stuff is gorgeous. It looks like this ugly, boring brown before it's heat set. And you may have noticed I forgot to treat my card with some EK Success powder tool, so I'm having issues here where the embossing powder is sticking to areas where I don't want it to. So I'm just going to take a brush and brush that off and just make sure that I get those images good and covered. And so it's still just looking like boring brown, but once you heat set this, it is amazing. So I have my heat tool here, I let it get good and hot, and I'm going to take it to this paper. This did take a little bit longer to heat set than some of my other embossing powders, so just heads up on that, but I did heat every little bit of that up until it's shiny. Now it's hard to see on camera. You can see a little bit of that shimmer, but you'll see it better in the photos at the end of the video. So I'm now remembering to treat this with my EK Success tool, and now I'll go in with my next largest, or smallest I guess, image of this other leaf and fill in some more areas, again rotating it. And so I've gone ahead and done that step, stamping and then heat embossing for each one of those different images. I decided not to use that flower, but here you have this fun customized background. Now to color this, I'm going to do distress inks. So I have my non-stick craft mat. I'll go ahead and link all these products down below, and I'm just smushing some of these colors out onto the mat. I'm using ripe persimmon, seedless preserves, and gathered twigs, and I just kind of put those randomly on the mat. I'm going to take some plain water and spritz this quite a bit to get that ink moving and get it wet. And this is going to kind of act like watercolor. So now I can turn my panel over and smush it into this ink on my mat. If you are a perfectionist, this probably isn't the technique for you. You don't really have control over what it looks like. You can keep dabbing it in and moving, but the colors, because they're all down there at the same time, are all going to kind of blend and meld and give you this just really pretty kind of fall colored background. So anywhere that there's white areas, I'm just dipping those back into the ink. The more you dip it in, the more it blends and it ends up being mud, so you do have to be careful. As I dry that, I am making sure to keep my heat tool moving and holding it up above the cardstock so it doesn't reactivate my heat embossing. I decided it needed a little bit more purple, so I'm going to go back in with that seedless preserves. This is reactivating some of the color that's already on the panel, so it is going to blend a little bit, but I am able to get a more purple tone to this card. And I went ahead and dried that again, and now I'm just taking plain water from my distress sprayer and spraying that onto the card, letting it sit for a few seconds, and then blotting that up with my paper towel. And that gives you that kind of bleached look in areas and just adds more texture. I went ahead and let that dry, and now I'm taking some, I think this is brushed bronze or brushed copper, I'll have it linked down below, Martha Stewart craft paint, added a little bit of water, and I'm flicking some of this onto the card. You can't really see the detail on camera, but it just gives this really pretty shimmery splattered look to the background. Set that aside to dry, and now I'm moving on to the panel for my sentiment. So this is a regular piece of cardstock cut to 5.5 inches wide by 1.5 inches tall. I will cut this down in a minute, but that's what I'm starting with. And I pulled the You Are Loved stamp set. This has some great words that you can create sentiments. So you can either use this in your Bible journaling or create cards with it, which I really like that versatility. I'm lining this all up on a clear acrylic block. I like to use one that has grid lines on it so it's easier to line up. I'm going to treat this cardstock with my EK6S powder tool because I will be embossing the sentiment. So I'm going to ink it up with that Versamark ink once again. And you'll see these stamps are a little bit cleaner, so it's harder to see my stamping. So it is a clear, sticky ink. It dries pretty slowly, but you do want to kind of get the embossing powder on there quickly so that it doesn't dry. You want to make sure that that embossing powder sticks to that ink. So I'm going to pull out that same Zing copper embossing powder and cover that over the sentiment, and then I went ahead and heat that up with my heat tool again. And now I'm going to color this cardstock. So I'm making a custom colored cardstock using some milled lavender distress ink and my ink blending tool, and I'm lightly going over this cardstock and blending it in. I've gone ahead and sped this up quite a bit, and I'm just going to cover that entire panel with this ink, and so you get this really pretty purple panel. So now I'm going to trim this down, and so I want it to be slightly smaller than my card base. So I'm going to take 1/4 inch off of the side of this panel and then 1/4 inch off the top. For all the measurements, be sure to head on over to the Sonshine Stamp Co blog. I will have all those measurements over there if you have any questions about that. This little piece here, I went ahead and just took 1/8 inch off the side, and then I'll cut it down further once I have it adhered to my card. That way I'm sure that it's the exact same width as my card. So this panel will end up being 4 inches by 5 1/4. I'm going to go ahead and adhere this little piece down using some Tombow Mono Multi liquid glue. This is a really strong adhesive, and since I have that heat embossing on that panel, I want to make sure it sticks really well. I'm going to line that up on the bottom third portion of this card. You can see how gorgeous that copper embossing is. And then here I can snip off the little bit of excess, and that way I know it's exactly the same size as that other panel. Here's some thin copper washi. I believe that I got this from Hobby Lobby. If I can find it, I'll link it down below. I'm just adding this to kind of help transition between that purple panel with the patterned panel. And I'll just wrap the excess around to the back side, and really, really, really pretty. So here I have a card base. This is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 top folding 110 pound card base. I'll have all those details over on the blog. And I'm going to adhere my panel using some foam tape. This way it'll pop off that card just a little bit. Makes it a little more fun, adds a little more detail. This is still able to be mailed through the mail, no problem. It doesn't get too smushed. Sorry for the sirens. We still have fire going on here near our house. So I'm going to adhere that down, and you can see now I have 1/8 inch border of the card all around the edge of that panel. Here are some sequins that I found in the Target dollar spot. They say gold, but they're more of that coppery color. I went ahead and adhered those down with that Tombow glue once again. And that is it for the card. So be sure to check out my blog post from a couple days ago talking about what the encouragement dare is. And head on over to the Sonshine Stamp Co blog for details on this card and where you can get those stamps at. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel if you're not already subscribed. And until next time, thank you so much. Bye-bye.